He was folded on the curb like a wrecked sail, the city spilling light over him as if it could wash him into ordinary. Leela Morneau had reasons not to stop, reasons with numbers and due dates. But his eyes lifted through the blur and found hers, and there was a boy in them, lost in the storm. Before we begin, if this kind of story speaks to your heart, feel free to share where you're watching from. It's always beautiful to see how far stories like this can travel. Enjoy the story. Day 1, the alley by the sea after midnight, the Larkspur Hotel breathed differently, a softer swell under the clatter, like an old creature dreaming. Leela slipped out the service door for a shot of air before the last round of tables. The Pacific threw its salt at her face. The alley, always slick with seawater and stories, was empty except for him, immaculate suit, one shoe untied, cheek pressed to a damp cardboard box as if that might make it warmer. She didn't know the face yet. Didn't know the name that could tilt stock markets. She came closer because people were not trash. "Sir," she said. "Hey." He swayed upright, revealing a spill of whiskey across the front of his shirt and a temple bruise where the curb had introduced itself. Not a sir, just road, boat room." His breath was an orchard on fire. She grabbed his elbow before he slid back down. "You're at the Larkspur?" She tilted his wrist. A little white band was there, like a hospital tag, but it was a gym's, a titanium thing that probably controlled a smart house somewhere high enough to forget ground. He patted his pockets with a confusion that might have been charming in a different life. He produced a black leather folio with an embossed W and a keycard. "Win," he said, and tilted his head as if he'd surprised himself by finding the word. Sela's win, Sela's win. She knew it later, hearing it. In the moment, he was just a slumping man with an expensive problem. He tried to put money in her hand, pushing against her fingers with the paper insistence of someone used to solving everything in green. "No," she said, firm. "You don't need to pay me to be a person." He blinked at that. The corner of his mouth softened. They took the back elevator to the 21st floor, Leela whispering apologies to the carpet when he scuffed it. The Larkspur was an old grand thing, Art Deco ribs and velvet lungs, and it made a sound when you disrespected it. The brass doors parted like eyelids. She prayed no one would catch her, because Mr. Shaw loved rules like other men loved dogs. The keycard worked. The suite was a museum of good taste with a view that pulled the ocean inside. He sagged onto the couch, then flinched as if the leather burned him. "Water," she said. "Stay with me, okay?" "Okay," he echoed, childishly compliant for a Titan. She found the kitchen and filled a crystal glass. He touched it like it might bite him, then obeyed. She took off her server jacket, thick black polyester with a stitched L on the lapel, and draped it over the tufted chair near him. He was shivering in that way the body does when blood remembers its obligations. "Should I call someone?" she asked. He stared at a painting above the fireplace, blue slash of ocean, gull caught mid-cry. "You ever notice," he murmured, "how the sea doesn't care if you watch it? It just keeps being the sea." "Yeah." She sat on the coffee table that cost more than her entire apartment, "but I still watch." He laughed, then flinched. The bruise was a live wire. "There's a story there." "There's always a story," she said. Fumbling, he dug in the folio and dragged out a thin metal card and something else, a handwritten note with a child's drawing. A crooked yellow house, a stick figure with a bun for hair. He stared at it until his face changed. Something dropped down inside him, heavy and private. "Hey, it's okay," she said, resisting the urge to reach out. Boundaries, policy, life had been teaching her both. He wiped his mouth with the heel of his hand. "I was supposed to tear something down in the morning." "Don't," she said, because she was bold when tired. "Tear down less, the world has enough dust." He smiled then, wobbly and true. Could you write that down?" "What, so you can forget you heard it?" She stood, went to the little brass tray by the minibar for the hotel paper and pen. But her own sketch pad had ridden in her bag out of habit, the pages whispering of a lobby with more light, a staircase with less ostentation, a cafe that didn't hide the ocean. Her cheeks went hot at the thought of him seeing it. She wanted nothing from him, but she wanted a lot for this place. She scribbled instead, "Drink water again in 10 minutes. Don't sleep on your back, ice for the bruise, tear down less." He took the paper like it was a passport. You're not like?" "Yeah," she said, picking up empty glasses and setting them in the sink so it looked like a place that made sense. "I get that a lot." He followed her with his eyes around the room like he wasn't sure she was real. "What's your name?" "Leela." "Thank you, Leela." He opened his wallet again, stubborn in the way of the rich. "I insist." "If you insist," she said, "then insist on leaving your cards in your pocket and not aspirating your own vomit tonight." He laughed, a surprised bark, and looked younger. He slid the bills back, more obedient than she'd expected, and sat there with his hands on his knees like a boy at confession. She hesitated at the door. Do you have someone to call? A friend? He stared at the fancy rug. I have people. That's not the same thing, she said. No, he whispered. It really isn't. She left her jacket without meaning to. In the hallway, she remembered it and nearly turned back. Then she saw the time, 126. Her mother's last oxygen canister probably running lower than the app said. She closed her eyes, swallowed, and walked. Day 2, the manager and the mother, you took a guest to his room, Mr. Shaw said in that terrible sing-song of a man who enjoys how you are about to beg him. His office smelled like antiseptic and expensive cologne, a fist in the nose compared to the sea. The morning light made the dust motes look like trespassers. He was unable to get there on his own, Leela said. She kept her shoulders proud because she had learned that if you hunched, men like Shaw hooked their claws there. That's security's job, or the concierge. Security was on a call. She didn't add that Tarek had been dealing with a couple fighting in the lobby, the woman wincing where her arm had bloomed purple. I was here. Which is worse, he said, smiling as if he'd told a joke. He pushed a form across the desk with a punctual finger. Write up for non-compliance with guest privacy policy. She could see it, the sentence they wrote, entered guest suite without authorization in block letters that would live in a file. The second write-up this month, the first had been for giving a homeless man coffee off the back entrance, because life was ironic. You want me to leave someone in the alley who can barely stand? Do you want to keep your job? He asked, leaning back. We have standards, Leela, and clientele with expectations. If anything had gone missing from that suite. Did it? She forced the tremor out of her voice. He squinted, slow and reptilian. That's not the point, she signed because the rent didn't sign itself. As she put the pen down, she noticed her jacket on the coat rack behind him, black against his Picasso print. He saw her see it and smiled that awful smile again. Mr. Wynne returned it, he said, with a note. He slid an envelope across. Inside was the hotel's thank you card with print letterhead and scrawl underneath, for water and for not selling my face. SW, also tear down less. The S looked like a wave and a hook. Mr. Shaw sniffed. He also left a tip. She looked up sharply. For me, Shaw added. For the staff? He paused. He asked for you. I told him you were on shift later. Mr. Wynne remembered her. The thought slid warm along her skin and then cooled just as quickly with calculation. Mr. Shaw would have liked her to blush. She didn't. On break, she called home, listened to the phone ring until her mother's rasp came online. Hey, Mommy, Leela said, wincing at the way her voice softened. It always did. Her mother brought out the original Leela, the one who still could be good. My canción, Camilla whispered. Breath whistled around her words. You at the hotel? Always. She looked at her reflection in the mirror by the staff sink. There was a bruise shadowing her own cheek from where she'd walked into a cupboard door 2 days ago. How's the tank? I like the hum. It sounds like the ocean when I close my eyes. There was an intake then, a hitch. Your father loved the ocean. Leela turned away from the mirror so no one could see her face. Is he still dead? Her mother laughed, the sound thin and wild. In this house, we don't believe in resurrections. He's gone, you're here. Yeah, Leela said, pressing the heel of her hand over this ache just beneath the clavicle that she called rent and grief and fear. I'm here. Don't let them turn you into a thing that only walks. You are a person who sings. After the shift, Leela collected her jacket from Mr. Shaw's office. Between the lining and the seam, something crackled. Her sketch pad was missing, she realized as she shrugged into the warmth. She must have left it in the suite. She saw herself asking Mr. Shaw for it and pictured the gleam in his eye as he declined. Another night without drawing then. Another night where hope had to wait. Day 3, the sketchbook and the man who could bully the sun. It was afternoon when he came back. Not the discreet return of a man who always left messes for other people to tidy, but a deliberate arrival. A car that could hold 2 small cars, a driver whose posture could slice onions, 2 assistants trailing him like commas. He stood in the Larkspur lobby and looked up at the ceiling like it had said his name. Sila's win up close wasn't handsome like Movies. He was handsome like a cliff, carved by weather, dangerous in certain light. The bruise at his temple had blossomed into a bruise field. His suit was immaculate, of course, but he wore exhaustion like an accessory. He didn't even get to the desk because Mr. Shaw oozed from a pillar almost instantly. Mr. Wynne, Shaw cooed, his smile several watts brighter than anything Leela had ever elicited. Welcome back to the Larkspur, I hope you— Your elevators smell like bleach and old champagne, Wynne said. He looked around, violet-eyed casualties of an insomniac's morning glittering. Who has changed the flowers? They look angry. Shaw's smile flickered. Our arrangements are. I want to see your manager, Wynne said, and the room did a thing around him. The air leaned forward. I am the manager, Shaw said, a bit too quickly because he loved that part. Sterling Shaw. Wynne registered it with a nod. Sterling like the silver, He scanned the lobby, the gold benches that had gleamed in old photographs but now looked like someone's idea of wealth. Where is? He looked past Shaw, past the concierge, and landed on Leela, who was carrying a tray with 4 empty cappuccino cups and a bowl of sugar packets because life was always sloppier than you wanted when a moment arrived. There, he said. Could I speak with you? Shaw pivoted, and Leela watched him mask his distaste. For a breath, she considered pretending she hadn't heard. Her own face felt hot with the staff eyes on her. She went anyway, balancing the tray, her heart a fish in her throat. Hi, she said. He smiled, brief and real. Hi, Shaw inserted himself like a knife. Anything you wish to tell Mr. Wynne can go through me. Wynne's gaze slid to Shaw like a man who doesn't always remember the existence of ants and then return to her. May I have my thing? The book. She set the tray down on the credenza hard enough that 2 spoons hopped, and she felt Shaw's little intake of disgust like the pop of a bad song. I left my sketchbook in your room, I'm sorry. Wynne's mouth tilted. Then it was mutual. You have my sketchbook? Relief and embarrassment collided. That book was all the private architecture of her hope. She did not want his eyes in its rooms. It was under the chair, he said softly, as if he knew exactly what she'd thought. I didn't read much. The last word was an apology. You really think the lobby needs more light? She blinked then, because it was easier than gratitude to use the truth, only if people are going to keep living. Behind her, someone laughed nervously. The assistants pretended to consult a phone. Mr. Shaw's mouth made a straight line, a scar across his face. Mr. Wynne would be happy to return your journal, Shaw said, but we need to make sure no sensitive information was conveyed. No, Wynne said, quiet and lethal. This is between me and Miss Morneau. Shaw's smile returned as if magnetized. Of course. Wynne stepped aside, making a little space in the marble for something that wasn't show. Can you take a break? He asked. Do we allow that? Leela threw the question toward Shaw without turning her head. Shaw's jaw worked. 10 minutes. 15, Wynne said, and Shaw pretended to say it first. They sat in the little alcove by the piano, out of the center of the lobby's theatrics. He handed the sketchbook over with the caution you lend a sleeping animal. I'm sorry I wasn't conscious enough to say thank you properly, he said. His voice in this smaller space was quieter. You saved me from having my stomach pumped or my picture taken in a way that would have been costly. Everyone deserves to be messy sometimes, she said, securing her book to her chest like armor. People shouldn't be punished for being human. He studied her face. You sound like you had to say that to yourself a lot. She laughed once, short. I do dishes in the morning and forget the water's hot, so yes, he exhaled. I came to this city to tear down the Larkspur, he said like a confession. It clicked then, the feeling she'd had in his suite when he'd said the word. I own the debt. I was going to foreclose. It's worth more to my board as condos. Condos? The word dropped like a bad stone in the throat of the hotel's echoes. I grew up 10 blocks from here, he said. In a rectangle with 2 windows and a mother who saved change in a jar labeled Christmas in July. She used to bring me to this lobby on days when the heat was unbearable and we could pretend to be guests for an hour. They tricked me into thinking there was a kind of world that wouldn't notice if I slipped out. He looked around, seeing ghosts. It saved me once, then it decided it didn't need me. And so what? You saved yourself and now you're allowed to tear it down? She was too tired to be polite. He absorbed the hurt without flinching. Power is not better pain. He breathed in through his nose. No, it isn't. You already made the decision? She asked, bracing. I did. He looked at her hands on the book, the knuckles scarred from a tray drop last winter. Then I was curled up in an alley with my head on a box, and a woman I didn't pay pulled me off the ground like I was a person, not a problem. You were a mess, she said, but you were a person. He smiled again at that. My mother used to say that when I came home with a 6 on a math test. Not a problem, a person who made one. I like her, Leela said. She realized too late how it sounded to talk about an alive mother in the past tense. But his eyes didn't shudder. He stared at the ceiling where gold leaf peeled like old sunburn. When did you give up on your drawings? He asked. She bristled. I didn't. You did. He jutted his chin at the edges of the sketchbook, curled from coffee stains and rain. At least a little. When When my mother's lungs started failing, she said, the honesty slipping out like a secret. When the tuition bills said you've been a lovely dreamer, now pay for your mistake. When another man like you told me I needed a portfolio of certain proportions that I didn't have. Another man like me, he repeated, almost gently. Do I want to meet him so I can punch him? You can't punch a system, she said. You can only refuse to let it impress you. He made a noise that might have been laughter and might have been the start of a sob. The assistants shifted in the periphery like birds. I want to show you something. He took out his phone. A number of zeros and a news headline flashed by like a waterfall. He swiped to a photograph, black and white, a younger woman in a maid's uniform standing at a window with a shy smile, the larkspur's crown reflected in the glass. My mother, he said. Second shift, 1986. She told me she loved the smell of this carpet, can you imagine? Loving the smell of something that held other people's dirt. Leela smiled despite everything. Maybe she loved what happened on it, wedding shoes, children running in stockings, good things. Maybe, he cleared his throat. I shouldn't have come, this is a business. And a place where people fall in love and get fired and eat cake. She leaned back. Those two truths live together or they don't. He looked at her like she was a stranger he already wanted as a friend. Mr. Shaw says you need to sign an NDA, she grinned. He can ask. Don't, Wynne said, all softness replaced with steel suddenly. Don't sign anything you don't want to sign. Tell him that, she said lightly. He stood. I will. She watched him cross the lobby, the assistants flanking him like parentheses. Mr. Shaw met him halfway, a smile with teeth. Wynne was all courtesy as he took a security badge from one of his assistants and held it up to the elevator panel. He rode to the executive floor where the hotel's owner, some corporation with a dozen names, kept a glass-walled office. It turned out his insistence on the NDA had been preemptive. Because by late afternoon, Mr. Shaw was waiting for Leela by the staff lockers with a termination paper in his left hand and security in his right. Day 4, the fall you're firing me because I helped a drunk man, Leela said, looking at the paper like it was a joke and the punchline was too long in coming. Because you entered a guest suite without authorization, Mr. Shaw said. Also because you were insubordinate, and because we can't afford you undermining guest privacy. Also, a guest reported missing cufflinks this morning from a suite on 22. The room you visited? She felt the blood go out of her face like a tide. I didn't go to 22. Details, he said, flicking his wrist. HR will process your final paycheck. You're making this up, she said. The security guard behind him, Tarek, kind eyes, big shoulders, wouldn't meet her gaze. Remove your ID, Mr. Shaw said. She slid the lanyard over her head with the carefulness of someone removing in Roman 4. He snatched it and gestured. Tarek's hand hovered near her elbow. Please don't touch me, she said, because dignity is its own country even when you've lost your passport. She took the staff stairs because the elevator would have smelled like someone else's perfume. Her locker held a change of clothes and a small crumpled napkin with a poem she'd copied from a book once. When they go low, we go to the ocean. She stuffed the napkin in her pocket and walked out the side door with the ocean's voice banging in her head. Outside, the sky was bruise-colored too. Appropriate. Her phone pinged. A text from her mother, Dialogo. She taught classes to herself in Spanish from the radio. The app thought it was cute, the way it celebrated her tiny language wins. Leela swiped to call. Hey, Mommy, she said when her mother's voice came. Did they do the thing with your wages? Camilla asked without greeting. She had a way of seeing the end without needing the middle, like she'd read the script. Not yet. You sound like you swallowed a vacuum. I got fired. Oh, my Amber. Her mother's breath surged and fell. For being good. For policy, Leela said. You know how policy is always tall and neat and wears a suit. I know how they wrap cruelty in procedure and then call it civilization, Camilla murmured. Come home, I made soup. You're not supposed to be boiling things unsupervised. I used the electric kettle, don't fight me. Her mother's voice tried for stern and landed on soft. Come home, we'll make a plan. Plans felt ridiculous against the size of the rent due date. Leela bought a bag of oranges with her last cash anyway. On the bus, her phone rang with an unknown number. She let it ring to voicemail. Unknown numbers didn't bring her good news. It rang again. She picked up out of spite. Miss Morneau, the voice was a woman's, warm and precise. This is Kay from Wynne Holdings. Mr. Wynne would like to meet with you if you're available. I'm not available, Leela said automatically, then added, he knows what happened. He does, Kay said. The background hum sounded like money. He would appreciate the opportunity to apologize, and he has something he wants to discuss. What? Leela stared out the window at a woman with a stroller huddled under a bus shelter that did not shelter. I'm not sure I'm in the mood to be bought. Kay was quiet in the way of people who understood that not everything was about them. It's not that, can we send a car? No, Leela said. You can text me a place. I'll walk. Kay let out a small sound that felt like respect. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the cafe by the pier with the blue chairs? I know it, Leela said. Thank you, Kay paused. Also, for what it's worth, he meant it when he wrote the note. What note? Tear down less, Kay clicked her tongue. He's been saying it a lot. Day 5, breakfast with a billionaire. The cafe with blue chairs had a menu full of things with poached eggs. Leela ordered coffee black because she wasn't on vacation, and when a neatly dressed man sat down opposite her, she almost didn't recognize him. No suit. A navy sweater and a contrition you could feel across the table. I'm sorry, Silas said, no ramp up. For last night, for everything that happened because you helped me, it's insane. It's the larkspur, she said. Insane is the wallpaper. He smiled, but it went nowhere. I went downstairs yesterday after we spoke and watched Mr. Shaw do the dance some men do around power. I felt sick. I called my general counsel and said I wanted the hotel. You already own it. Debt isn't the same as a heart, he said. I own the right to take its pulse away, that's different. He lifted his coffee and then set it down again. I'm not allowed to make decisions alone, not entirely. I have a board, investors, a lot of people who like to remind me that I'm temporary in a system that is permanent. But sometimes you see clearly for 10 minutes, and if you do something irreversible in those 10 minutes, the system has to live with it. He looked at the boats, neat white shoulders in the water. I had 10 minutes yesterday. She waited. She was not going to rescue the man from his silence. She had enough men like that to manage at payroll. I bought the larkspur, he said, low and fierce. I can buy it because the bank that holds the lien is balanced on an edge and boards like mine prefer stability. I offered them a number they could say to their investors' faces. The sale closes in, he looked at his watch. 18 hours if no one torpedoes it. This is fast. That's how I stay alive, he said, smiling without moving his mouth. Speed, certainty, but I want to do the next bit slower. The next bit. I want you to own it, he said. Leela's laughter was such a shock it coughed. What? Not as a PR stunt, he said. He met her eyes the way a man meets a ledge. Not as a front, real ownership, you as the steward know, screw that word, the owner, I can structure a trust that protects you from what's coming. I can do the hard legal stuff, you do the soul. Stop, she said, because her heart had started to sprint and she hated it. This is ridiculous. I am a waitress who got fired yesterday. I have an art school debt and a mother who thinks the ocean hums in our kitchen. You want to hand me $100 million of building and 1,000 headaches and hope I don't bleed out? Yes, he said simply. No, she returned as simply. He breathed out and the steam of their coffee twisted between them like a ghost. Okay, what if you don't own it alone? He slid a folder across the table. What if you own the controlling share in a trust that requires? Get this. Remind me if I'm going too philanthropic, fair wages, union neutrality, affordable rooms for locals for a percentage of nights, a free community space on Thursdays, and an apprenticeship program in design for kids who can't afford to have dreams. And your mother gets access to care, and you get a salary that takes away the word emergency. Leela stared at him. No one does that. I do, he said, and his eyes had a new thing in them, not arrogance, but urgency. Because I've done the other thing for 20 years and all it buys you is silence in rooms that echo, I have an opportunity to atone. I won't pretend that's not selfish. But I need a face to put on it that isn't mine and a spine to give to it that is not made in my factories. Why me? She asked, because she had to hear him say it. Because you moved a man in a suit like a sack of flour and didn't brag about it, he said, a smile twisting at his mouth. Because you drew light into a hotel that had forgotten it. Because your mother's voice on your phone sounded like the reason I didn't throw myself off a balcony at 26. That's a heavy reason to put on a person's day, she said. She felt it, though, the click of the universe when something goes in the groove it had been carved for. It frightened her. I can't do it without you, he said, too fast probably. He pressed his fingers to his forehead. Also, if I show up and say I'm going to keep a hotel instead of tearing it down, half of New York thinks I've lost my nerve. But if a woman who used to polish the glass says it and the city sees itself in her, we're unkillable. There it is, she said. The PR. It will help, he admitted. But I'm not going to dress up greed and call it good because you're a nice audience. This costs me, the board will flay me. If I can build a machine that refuses them their power while I still have the right gear in my hands, I'll die with less regret. You're not dying, she said before she could stop herself, because that word was a salt lick in her mouth. Everyone is, he said lightly, a joke that wasn't a joke. His eyes had that flash again, the cliff under weather. She wondered what debt those eyes had to pay to. Okay, she said slowly, because the part of her that had spent the last decade not trusting anything was taking a nap in the cafe light. Say I believe you. How do you make me owner of a hotel in a week? An assignment of interest to a trust I create today with you as the trustee, Kay's voice said as she materialized like a benevolent apparition with a folder. We've done this before with cultural projects. It's a little, unorthodox for a hotel, but then so is our existence. You keep a lawyer in your pocket? Leela said. Kay smiled. Just on Tuesdays. Silas leaned forward. I'm asking a lot, he said, voice low. I know, I'm asking you to take the weight that money disguises. It's heavy, it will make you tired. It will make men like Mr. Shaw hate you. It will make some union call you a scab and some banker call you a saint. You will be wrong, you will. But you will have done something that turns a building from a joke into a promise. What if I fail? Leela asked, not because she planned to, but because you should do your due diligence even with miracles. Then I'll fail with you, he said. And the hotel? We'll put bolts in the plan, Kay said, gentle but sharp. Safeguards, you won't be able to liquidate it on a bad day. Leela snorted. On a bad day I liquidate tears, not hotels. Silas leaned back, the relief that he wasn't sure he was allowed yet creeping over his mouth. So, Leela said. She thought of the nights her mother had said, Haslo, do it, about little things like trying a new recipe and how those little things had turned into big things like paying rent. She thought of the way the Larkspur's staircases had looked like spines that morning in the corridor light. She thought of Mr. Shaw's little paper, the word terminated printed like a vaudeville joke. She felt the fish in her throat settle. Not for your redemption, for my mother. For the people who changed sheets at midnight and for the kids who stand on toes to see the ceiling, I'll do it. Silas closed his eyes just for a second, and when he opened them he looked like he had taken off a second coat you couldn't see. Day 6, the counterpunch, there is a force in the world that hates grace. It took 6 hours for Mr. Shaw to file an injunction, 2 hours for the current owner's lawyers to find a judge willing to ruin dinner, and 20 minutes for someone to leak to a gossip site that a waitress was being handed a historic hotel by a drunk billionaire. By the time Leela returned home with papers that smelled like ink and future, her phone was vibrating across the kitchen table with 100 friend requests from people she didn't know and 3 missed calls from a journalist. Camilla sat by the window with her blanket tucked around her legs like she was a queen in exile. You look like a person who's about to climb a mountain in sandals. They're sturdy sandals, Leela said, dropping her bag. The lino in the kitchen had a curl by the stove. Every year the heat did that. She took her mother's hand. Mommy, something impossible. Good, Camilla asked, eyes narrowing the way they did when she tasted soup. Scary, Leela said. Same family, Camilla murmured. She listened to the story the way she listened to boleros, with her eyes not blinking. When Leela finished, she didn't laugh. She didn't doubt. She did what Leela had always both wanted and feared she would do. She believed it. Of course, Camilla said. You have been owning things your whole life. Now a building can be won. It is only a larger pot. Leela laughed and cried. She was not proud about which slipped down first. The news on her phone tried to make it cartoon, the comments calling her gold digger in 3 languages, Saint in 2. Silas texted once to say a man named Simon from a hedge fund was trying to kneecap them. His message was a screenshot of a contract with too many red lines for an ordinary life. Kay sent a shorter text, don't read anything after midnight. At midnight, Leela's phone buzzed with a number she did recognize, Tarek. Don't tell me you're calling to ask for my apron, she said. Shaw called the cops, Tarek said, voice low. He says you stole those cufflinks. He's trying to paint you as a thief before you become an owner. The old trembling started in Leela's knees, the one she'd learned to hide with a smile. Of course he is. I told them you didn't, Tarek said. I saw you in the suite, I'll testify. Thank you, she said, and meant it cool and fierce. I don't know why you're still talking to me. Because my grandmother cleaned rooms here for 30 years, he said. Sometimes helpful is simple. At 2 a.m., someone tried to kick in the door of Leela's apartment. She rose like a blade. It was only a man selling magazines, or that's what he said when the chain held. Still, her mother's breath rattled after he left like a paper bag caught on a fence. Tomorrow, Leela whispered into her mother's hair. We win tomorrow and it gets quiet. You're a bad liar, Camilla said, smiling in the dark. But it's okay. I slept beside your father when he swore we'd always own a boat. I like people who plan for the sea. Day 7, the ballroom the injunction hearing was held in a courtroom that looked designed for a television series, tall windows, a judge whose face suggested moral fatigue, would that had seen promises and lies polished into it for a century. Leela's name sounded strange in that echo. It had only ever bounced off tiles and hallway paint before. The other side's lawyer, a woman with perfect hair and a mouth used to winning, made it simple. This was capricious, reckless, irresponsible. A man in a midlife crisis cannot hand a woman off the street a hotel. A fiduciary duty is not a charity. She did not say the words waitress and billionaire, but they were all over her pitch like perfume. Kay stood. Kay's voice was a string of pearls you didn't notice until your fingers bled from running them. Wynn Holdings has entered into a legal agreement to acquire the property, she said, crisp as sea air. Mr. Wynn intends to assign interest to a newly created trust with provisions that satisfy any reasonable investor's concerns regarding stability and return while also creating public benefit. Public benefit, the judge said, skeptical like a man who'd eaten too much rich food last week. Yes, she said. There is precedent. Also, Your Honor, the opposing party has engaged in practices that frankly appear to prioritize quick liquidations over community value. Emails are available under seal. Silas sat beside Layla in a suit that said I am non-threatening. His knee bounced. He pressed it against hers and she let it calm. When Mr. Shaw took the stand, the room changed temperature. He testified about company culture and protecting guests and missing items, his words sliding around the truth like a buttered knife. Do you have evidence that Miss Morneau stole anything? Kay asked. I have experience, he said, letting the word do the dirty work. People like her. Finish the sentence, Kay said. He didn't. Your Honor, Kay continued, I'd like to introduce into evidence a video from the hotel's hallway camera on 19 showing Miss Morneau assisting Mr. Wynn to his room, not entering 22. In fact, security logs show she never visited 22 within the relevant time period. The judge watched. The room watched. In the grainy black and white, Leela saw herself as other people would, serious, careful, hand under elbow, not an angel but a person doing a thing because it demanded doing. She felt a sudden, inappropriate urge to cry. Mr. Wynn, the opposing counsel said, pivoting, is it your practice to get drunk and hand away property? Silas smiled with his mouth, not his eyes. No, but it is my practice to correct error. I had intended to tear down the larkspur. I now intend the opposite. And why the trust? Why this woman? The counsel's eyebrows winged upward like birds in a bad painting. Because she is more qualified than you think, he said. Because she knows what the hotel smells like at 3 a.m., because she will hire people you would never interview, because your gold doesn't know how to polish itself and someone has to teach you that. The judge rapped once. We are not here to settle the class wars, papers rustled. In the pews behind them, Leela felt eyes she recognized from the lobby, Tariq, May from housekeeping in her best blouse, Franco from the kitchen, a tie straining at his throat, Zara from the front desk, who had taught Leela to breathe into a paper bag in the bathroom on Valentine's evening once. The judge sighed, a man tired of saying no. The injunction is denied, he said. The assignment may proceed. Miss Morneau, I hope you know you are entering a storm. Mr. Wynn, I suggest you buy an umbrella. Silas laughed once. Kay did something radical for a lawyer. She let herself smile. Leela didn't move, storms she knew. This one had her name. A week after she lifted Silas off a curb, Leela Morneau stood in the Larkspur's ballroom with the deed in her hand. For appearance's sake, it was an envelope that weighed more than it should. For the heart's sake, it was the sound of keys linked together, the literal ones, heavy brass engraved with numbers, and the metaphorical ones inside her chest turning in locks she'd never known were doors. The staff were gathered like a wedding. Does she belong here? Their faces said, and also please let her. Mr. Shaw stood a few paces away with rage like a new suit. He had been uninvited but arrived anyway. 2 security guards flanked him without touching. Silas took the microphone and did what he had not believed he could do. He relinquished control. I was going to tear this down, he said simply. I thought memory was an asset on a balance sheet. I thought my mother's hands on those banisters were her gift to me. I was wrong. He turned to Leela. You were right. Tear down less. Leela looked at her mother's face in her mind, the inhale before the chorus. She took the mic and felt a new thing rise in her, not a person who asks, a person who tells. This is yours, she said to the room, and meant the staff, meant the people who had ever sat in the chairs thinking for a second they belonged. But I'm going to hold it. We'll keep the sea in the hallways. We'll open the ballroom to weddings that can only pay in music. We'll pay fair. We'll listen to the people who clean as much as the people who eat. We'll be a little rebellious and a lot kind. If you hate that, there are other hotels. If you like it, there is work to do." Mr. Shaw stepped forward, red with fury. "You don't know what you're doing," he hissed. "You will destroy this place." Tarek's hand gently on his arm. "Mr. Shaw, it's time to go." "You can't." "We can," Silas said, and his voice was winter. "You're terminated." The word could be ugly. It glowed suddenly. Mr. Shaw sputtered and tried to gather dignity out of air. It escaped him. He left with his chin lifting and his career trailing behind him. Someone clapped. Then everyone clapped. Noise does that when relief has an exit. After, in the hush, as people formed knots around coffee and cake that must always appear in day rooms when something happens bigger than appetite, Silas found Layla by the window. "Thank you," he said, and she shook her head. "Don't start," she said. "We did a little thing in a big world." He looked out at the water. "I'm going away for a while," he said. "Rehab, not the secret kind, the kind where they tell you to shut up and listen." She nodded. "Good," he smiled. "You really are not going to make it easy for me, are you?" "Make what easy?" "Being a different kind of man." "No," she said. "Not my job, but I'll send you postcards from your hotel." He laughed, then grew serious. "There's something else." He reached into his coat and handed her a photograph. It was a woman in black and white in a maid's uniform, the hotel crown caught in the window behind her. "My mother kept this. You see the floor? She always said the day she stopped believing in God was the day they told her she couldn't sit in the lobby on her break. She had to sit in the service hall. This," he gestured around them, "is me telling her she can sit on the good chair now." Leela touched the edge of the photo with a reverence that surprised her. "Tell her you kept the flowers ugly," she said, wicked and true. He grinned. "I'll tell her we softened them." He tucked his hands into his pockets like a boy. "You're going to be good at this." "I'm going to be tired," she said. "Same thing," he said, and lifted a hand, half wave, half benediction. He left then, through the side entrance he had used as a kid when they pretended to be guests, and Leela watched him go and thought about the sort of men who left and the sort who returned. Later that night, the ballroom quiet, she sat on the stairs alone. The fluted columns hummed. The ocean threw its voice against the windows. She called her mother. There was no answer. Then a nurse answered, soft. "Your mother is resting. She is smiling. She told us to tell you to do it, Haslo." The hush after the words was the size of a city. Leela went home by taxi and sat next to her mother's bed and fell asleep with her head on the blanket. She woke to sunlight and the sound of nothing new. Grief is a door that opens and opens. Her mother had gone with the dawn. In the first weeks, Leela did the things that go on lists. She signed papers with her hand shaking. She replaced the angry flowers with cut leaves that looked like the kind of jungle that laughs at men who think they are the point. She rehired 3 people Mr. Shaw had arranged to fire. She installed a coffee machine in the staff room that didn't hiss like a snake. She opened the ballroom on Thursdays to young orchestras and old poets. She stood in the lobby at midnight to see if the floor would tell her what secrets it kept. When she unlocked the side door on her first Thursday and a girl and her mother walked in carrying a dress that was mostly ribbon, Leela saw in their faces what the word owner could mean when someone like her said it. "I heard you've got a space," the woman said, voice full of the caution of someone used to being told no. "For what?" Leela asked. "My daughter wants to dance," the woman said, "on a floor where they don't always make you feel like you should apologize for your shoes." Leela looked at the worn polish of the boards, at the light that had shifted today, kinder. "We've got a space," she said. "We're learning not to apologize, too." The girl spun, a ribbon of a person, feet spotting, arms wide. The sound of music rose. Leela closed her eyes. She could hear her mother humming in the kitchen, could smell oranges and bleach and ocean and the life that had always insisted on itself, despite the circumstances. She stood at the window in the suite where a week earlier a man had tried to hand her money for being human. She opened it. The sea inhaled. The hotel was hers and she was its. Through the glass, the city kept doing what it always does. Somewhere a man in a suit made a phone call that would move other men across the board like pieces. Somewhere, a girl like the ribbon spun in a small room and accidentally touched the ceiling with her fingers. Somewhere, a woman took a break in a lobby chair and was not told to move. Leela lifted the photograph of Silas's mother and set it on the mantel. Then she turned to the lobby and did what her mother had commanded her since long before a week had changed everything. "Haslo," her mother's voice said. "Do it." And she did.